The deafening crack of the hammer against wood silenced the crowded parlor of Weaver's funeral home, as Oliver Blackwell cleared his throat to read the will of one of San Pedro, California's most notable residents. Olivia Evans clutched her handkerchief tightly, her knuckles whitening as the lawyer's words fell like stones into the stunned silence. To my daughter, Olivia, I leave my sincere apologies. The family fortune has been depleted. What remains are debts totaling $12,000 to various creditors in San Pedro and surrounding territories. San Pedro, 1876. The coastal town that had once represented prosperity to Olivia now seemed to close in around her as the lawyer continued reading her father's will. Jonathan Evans had been known throughout California as a shipping magnate and landowner, but apparently his final years had been marked by poor investments and mounting debts. "This cannot be," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. At 22, she had returned from 2 years at a Boston finishing school, summoned home by news of her father's sudden passing. She'd expected to inherit the family estate, perhaps even a modest fortune. Instead, she was left with nothing but creditors who would soon come calling. "I'm afraid it's all here in the documentation, Miss Evans," Oliver Blackwell replied, adjusting his spectacles. "Your father's businesses failed in the last year. The house must be sold to satisfy the debts." From the corner of the parlor, Wyatt Ryder observed the proceedings with quiet interest. At 30, the rancher was one of San Pedro's most eligible bachelors, though he rarely came to town except for supplies or business. He had known Jonathan Evans, the man had borrowed money from him too, though Wyatt had written it off months ago. Olivia's composure cracked as she realized the full implications. "Where am I to go?" she asked, her voice trembling. Her green eyes, inherited from her mother who had passed away 10 years earlier, filled with tears she refused to shed in public. 3 days later, Olivia stood on the porch of her childhood home, watching as auctioneers prepared to sell off everything her family had owned. The house would be next. Dressed in a simple navy blue dress, her chestnut hair pulled back severely, she projected dignity despite her circumstances. "Miss Evans." She turned to find Wyatt Ryder standing behind her, hat in hand. She recognized him from her father's funeral and from stories around town. The owner of the Double R Ranch north of town, he was said to be fair but reserved, a man of few words but solid reputation. "Mr. Ryder," she acknowledged with a nod. "Have you come to purchase something from the estate?" "No, madam." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with whatever had brought him here. "I've come with a proposition." Olivia raised an eyebrow. At nearly 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin, Wyatt Ryder cut an imposing figure. His dark hair was in need of a trim, and his clothes, though clean, were practical rather than fashionable. But it was his eyes, a deep blue that reminded her of the ocean during a storm, that commanded attention. "I'm listening," she said cautiously. "I knew your father. He borrowed from me as well, though that's not why I'm here." Wyatt looked around at the activity in the yard. "I understand you're facing considerable debt." "My father's debts," she corrected. "Though apparently they've become mine. I'd like to clear those debts." Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do such a thing, Mr. Ryder? We're hardly acquainted." "I have my reasons," he replied. "But I'm not offering charity. I propose a business arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" she asked suspiciously. "The Double R needs someone to manage the house and accounts. I'm often away with the cattle or horses. In exchange for clearing your father's debts, you would come work at the ranch and receive half ownership." "Half ownership," Olivia repeated incredulously. "Of your ranch, Mr. Ryder, that's a fair exchange," he interrupted. "I need someone I can trust running things, someone with education and sense. You need a fresh start." He paused. "Your father spoke highly of your business acumen, said you had a better head for numbers than he did." Olivia felt tears threatening again. Her father had indeed taught her about business, letting her keep the family books since she was 16, something unusual for a young woman, but his praise had always been private. "Why would you give me half your ranch?" she pressed. "I've been considering taking on a partner for some time." "The ranch is growing. I can't manage it alone anymore," Wyatt explained. "This way I solve my problem and you solve yours." "And what would be expected of me?" she asked, straightening her shoulders. "Running the household, keeping the books, managing supplies and workers' pay." "Nothing improper, Miss Evans," he added, correctly interpreting her concern. "You'd have your own quarters in the main house. My foreman's wife, Martha Cooper, lives on the property with her husband. Your reputation would remain intact." Olivia looked past him to the auction. Her mother's china was being held aloft by the auctioneer. The alternative to Wyatt's offer was destitution, perhaps seeking work as a schoolteacher or companion to an elderly woman, if she could even secure such positions with her father's debts hanging over her. When would this arrangement begin? She asked. "Today. I've already spoken to Mr. Blackwell about settling the debts. He's drawing up the paperwork for the ranch partnership." Wyatt's directness was startling. "You were that certain I would accept?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "No, but I was hopeful." "The wagon's ready if you want to gather your personal belongings." Olivia considered her options, which were painfully few. "I accept your offer, Mr. Ryder," she said finally. "Though I must admit, I find your generosity baffling." "It's not generosity. It's good business," he replied. But there was something in his eyes that made her wonder if there was more to it than that. Within 2 hours, Olivia had packed her clothing, a few books, and the few personal mementos the auctioneers had permitted her to keep: her mother's locket, a small portrait of her parents, and her father's pocket watch. She left the house she'd grown up in without looking back, climbing into Wyatt Ryder's wagon with as much dignity as she could muster. The journey to the Double R Ranch took nearly 3 hours, following the coastal road before turning inland through rolling hills covered with scrub and occasional stands of oak. When they finally crested a rise and the ranch came into view, Olivia caught her breath. Spread out below them was a valley of lush grassland with a creek running through it. Cattle grazed in the distance, and closer to the main buildings, several horses occupied a corral. The ranch house itself was substantial, a 2-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings, a bunkhouse, and a large barn completed the central compound. "It's beautiful," Olivia said softly. "It was wilderness when I came here 8 years ago," Wyatt replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "Built it all from nothing." "How did you acquire so much land?" "Hard work." "Luck." He flicked the reins to urge the horses down the slope, and knowing when to take risks. As they approached the main house, a woman emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. Behind her, a tall, weathered man with graying temples stepped out, followed by a younger man who bore a striking resemblance to him. "That's Martha Cooper," Wyatt explained, "and her husband Thomas, my foreman. Their son James works as one of our cowhands." Martha Cooper hurried forward as the wagon stopped. "Welcome to Double R, Miss Evans," she said warmly. "We've prepared the east room for you. It has a lovely view of the sunrise." "Thank you, Mrs. Cooper," Olivia replied, surprised by the welcome. "I appreciate your hospitality." "It's Martha, please, and it'll be nice having another woman around. The men outnumber us something fierce." Thomas Cooper stepped forward to help Olivia down from the wagon. "Miss Evans," he greeted with a tip of his hat. "Boss has told us about the arrangement. We're glad to have you." Olivia glanced at Wyatt, wondering exactly what he had told his employees about their unusual partnership. But before she could ask, Martha was ushering her into the house, chattering about dinner and showing her to her room. The interior of the ranch house surprised Olivia. While not lavish, it was comfortable and well constructed, with solid furniture and polished wooden floors. Her bedroom was larger than she expected, with a brass bed, a dresser, washstand, and a small writing desk positioned near the window that overlooked the eastern pastures. "Dinner's at 6, Martha informed her. "The men eat in the bunkhouse, except for Mr. Ryder, Thomas, and occasionally James. I'll leave you to get settled." Alone for the first time since the reading of her father's will, Olivia sank onto the bed and finally allowed the tears to come. She cried for her father, for the life she'd lost, and for the uncertain future ahead. When her tears were spent, she washed her face, unpacked her belongings, and resolved to make the best of her situation. Dinner that evening was a quiet affair. Thomas Cooper spoke of ranch business with Wyatt, while Martha asked polite questions about Olivia's time in Boston. Wyatt said little, but Olivia often caught him watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. After the meal, Wyatt asked her to join him in his study. The room was lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk covered with papers. He gestured for her to take a seat. "I had Oliver Blackwell draw up the partnership agreement," he said, sliding a document across the desk. "I've paid all the creditors. You're free of your father's debts." Olivia skimmed the document, surprised by its simplicity. It granted her half ownership of the Double R Ranch and its assets, with stipulations regarding her responsibilities. There was also a clause stating that if either partner wished to dissolve the arrangement, they would need to buy out the other's share at fair market value. "This seems very generous, Mr. Ryder." "Wyatt," he corrected. "We're partners now." "Even so, this grants me an equal share in a property I've done nothing to build." "You'll earn it," he said simply. "The ranch needs what you bring to it." "And what is that exactly?" "Order, refinement." He hesitated. "A woman's touch." Olivia frowned. "I hope you're not expecting me to turn this into some sort of parlor house for entertaining." To her surprise, Wyatt laughed, a deep, genuine sound that transformed his face. "No, Miss Evans. I'm expecting you to help make this place more than just a working ranch, to make it a home." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "I'll try," she said softly, "but I must warn you, my skills are more in the realm of accounting than homemaking." "That's precisely what I need," he assured her. "Martha handles the cooking and most of the household matters. I need someone who can manage the business side." "Very well." Olivia picked up the pen he offered and signed the document. "I suppose I should start calling you Wyatt, and you should call me Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, and something in the way he said her name made her heart flutter unexpectedly. The next morning began Olivia's education in ranch life. After breakfast, Wyatt showed her to a small room off the main parlor that served as an office. Ledgers were stacked haphazardly on the desk, receipts were piled in a basket, and a calendar on the wall hadn't been updated since March, though it was now May. "As you can see, this needs attention," Wyatt said, gesturing to the chaos. "I'm good with cattle and horses, but paperwork—" "I understand," Olivia replied, already assessing the task before her. "I'll need to create a proper filing system, reconcile these accounts, and set up regular bookkeeping procedures." "I'll leave you to it then. I need to ride out with Thomas to check on the northern pasture. We've had some trouble with a mountain lion killing calves." Left alone, Olivia rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By midday, she had sorted the papers into categories: expenses, income, payroll, and correspondence. After lunch, She began entering figures into the ledger, occasionally finding discrepancies that needed investigation. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't notice Wyatt's return until his shadow fell across her desk. "You've made progress," he observed, looking around the now organized office. Olivia looked up, surprised to see the sun already low in the sky. "There's still much to do, but yes, I've started bringing order to the chaos." "You haven't stopped all day, have you?" she shrugged. "I find satisfaction in organizing things, and it helps keep my mind off." She trailed off, not wanting to speak of her father's death or her changed circumstances. "Your loss," Wyatt finished for her. "I understand. Work can be a comfort sometimes. Did you catch your mountain lion?" she asked, changing the subject. "No, but we found tracks. Thomas set some traps." He hesitated, then added, "I thought you might like to see the rest of the ranch tomorrow. You should know what you own now." The idea of spending a day away from ledgers and receipts was appealing. "I'd like that," she said. "Can you ride?" "Yes, though it's been some time." "I'll find you a gentle horse," he promised. The next morning, Olivia dressed in her simplest skirt and blouse, grateful she'd packed her sturdy boots. Martha provided her with a wide-brimmed hat to shield her face from the sun. At the stable, Wyatt was waiting with two saddled horses, a large bay gelding for himself and a smaller, dappled gray mare for her. "This is Misty," Wyatt said as he helped Olivia mount. "She's steady and sweet-tempered." The mare stood patiently as Olivia settled herself in the saddle, adjusting to the unfamiliar sensation after years away from horseback riding. Once she was comfortable, Wyatt mounted his own horse with the easy grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. They rode first to the eastern pastures, where 100 or more cattle grazed, then followed the creek that provided water for the ranch, stopping occasionally for Wyatt to point out boundary markers or features of the land. He explained his breeding program for both cattle and horses, the yearly rhythm of ranch work, and his plans for expansion. "You know a great deal about ranching for someone who's only been at it 8 years, Olivia commented as they stopped to rest the horses in the shade of an oak grove. "I worked on ranches since I was 15, Wyatt replied, dismounting and helping her down. "Learned everything I could before striking out on my own. And before that," a shadow crossed his face. "My parents had a small farm in Missouri. They died of fever when I was 14. I headed west afterward." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. "We have that in common than being orphaned." Wyatt nodded, unpacking a bundle Martha had prepared for them. He spread a blanket on the grass and set out bread, cheese, cold chicken, and a jug of lemonade. As they ate, Olivia found herself studying Wyatt more closely. Despite his taciturn nature, there was something compelling about him. His hands were strong and calloused from work, but his movements were precise, almost graceful. When he did speak, his words were thoughtful and direct. "May I ask you something personal?" she ventured. He looked at her with those intense blue eyes. "You may ask. I might not answer. Why aren't you married? A successful rancher like yourself must have had opportunities." Wyatt was quiet for so long that Olivia thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Never found the right woman, or maybe I wasn't looking." He paused. "And you, no suitors in Boston?" Olivia smiled wryly. "A few. None that interested me enough to consider marriage. I had planned to return to California eventually, perhaps start a business of my own." She sighed. "Of course, that was when I believed my father's business was still thriving." "What kind of business?" "I thought perhaps a bookshop. I've always loved reading." Wyatt glanced at her with new interest. "I noticed you brought books with you. What do you read?" "Everything. History, poetry, novels," she smiled. "Even manuals on agriculture recently." "I have books," Wyatt said, somewhat defensively. "In the study." Yes, I saw them. Quite an eclectic collection. I didn't expect to find Thoreau or Emerson on a cattle ranch. There's a lot of time for reading during winter evenings, he explained. Then, with a slight smile, he added, and perhaps I'm not quite the simple cowboy you might have assumed. I'm beginning to see that, Olivia admitted. She was discovering that Wyatt Ryder was a more complex man than town gossip suggested. They continued their tour after lunch, riding to the western edge of the property where it bordered public land. As the sun began to lower, they turned back toward the ranch house, but took a different route that led them past a stand of trees on a small hill. "What's up there?" Olivia asked, noticing what appeared to be wooden crosses. Wyatt's expression sobered. "Family cemetery. The previous owners of this land are buried there, and one of my ranch hands who died 2 years ago." Olivia felt a pang of sympathy. "No family of your own buried there?" "No," he said quietly. Then, after a moment, "Not yet." The simple statement contained volumes of loneliness that resonated with Olivia's own situation. As they rode back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon, she found herself wondering what kind of life she might build here, and what role Wyatt Ryder would play in it beyond their business partnership. Over the next few weeks, Olivia settled into life at the Double R. She established a regular system for the ranch accounts, created files for important documents, and set up a schedule for paying bills and workers. Wyatt seemed impressed with her efficiency, but gave her space to work as she saw fit. June brought the beginning of summer heat to the valley, and with it came the busiest time for the ranch. The annual cattle drive to the railhead at Bakersfield was approaching, and preparations consumed everyone's attention. Wyatt spent long days in the saddle, often returning after dark, too tired for more than brief conversations over late suppers. Olivia found her own days full as well. Beyond her accounting duties, she began making improvements to the house, rearranging furniture for better flow, adding curtains to windows that had been bare, and establishing a small garden with Martha's help. She also took over ordering supplies for the ranch, negotiating better prices with merchants in town who quickly learned she was not to be underestimated. On a particularly hot afternoon, Olivia was working in the office when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Looking out the window, she saw Wyatt and Thomas riding in at a gallop, supporting a third rider between them. She hurried outside as they reached the house. "What happened?" she asked, seeing the blood soaking the shirt of James Cooper, Thomas's son. "Mountain lion," Wyatt said tersely. "Caught him checking traps alone." Martha, hearing the commotion, rushed out and gave a cry of distress at the sight of her injured son. "Bring him inside," she ordered, practical despite her fear. The men carried James into the house and laid him on the kitchen table. Martha cut away his shirt to reveal deep gashes across his shoulder and chest. "Olivia, get my medicine box from my room," she instructed, "and boil water." Olivia rushed to comply, returning with the wooden box that contained Martha's medical supplies. The older woman had already cleaned the wounds with whiskey, causing James to cry out in pain despite his attempts to be stoic. "Hold him still," Martha told the men as she threaded a needle. "These need stitching." Olivia held a basin of clean water ready as Martha began the painful process of suturing the wounds. James gritted his teeth, occasionally groaning but never screaming, while his father murmured encouragements. Wyatt stood back, his face grim. When Martha finished, she applied a salve of her own making and bandaged the wounds. "He'll need watching tonight," she said, wiping her bloody hands on a towel. "Fever's the danger now." "I'll help," Olivia offered immediately. "We can take turns." Thomas carried his son to his cabin, where they made him comfortable in bed. Martha stayed with him first while Olivia prepared a light supper for everyone. When she brought food to Wyatt in his study, she found him staring out the window, still wearing his blood-stained shirt. "You should change," she said softly, "and eat something." He turned, his expression haunted. "It was my fault. I told him to check the traps this morning." "Did you tell him to go alone?" "No, he was supposed to wait for me." "Then it wasn't your fault," Olivia said firmly. "James made his own choice." Wyatt shook his head. "I'm responsible for everyone on this ranch." Olivia set the tray down and approached him. Without thinking, she placed her hand on his arm. "You can't control everything, Wyatt. Accidents happen. What matters is how we respond to them." He looked down at her hand, then into her eyes. Something shifted in his gaze, a softening, a moment of vulnerability. "Thank you," he said quietly. Olivia became acutely aware of their proximity, of the warmth of his arm beneath her fingers, of the subtle scent of leather and horses and sun-warmed skin. She stepped back, suddenly flustered. "You should eat," she repeated. "I'm going to relieve Martha soon." That night, as she sat beside James's bed during her watch, Olivia found herself thinking about Wyatt. The concern he'd shown for his injured ranch hand revealed a depth of character that impressed her. He wasn't just an employer. He genuinely cared for the people who worked for him. James recovered slowly but steadily over the next week. The mountain lion remained at large, and Wyatt organized hunting parties to track it, determined to eliminate the threat before the cattle drive. Olivia worried each time he rode out, a concern that went beyond the practical matter of their business partnership. One evening, as July approached, Wyatt found Olivia on the front porch, where she often sat in the cooler evening air. He took the chair beside her, stretching his long legs out before him. "The drive to Bakersfield starts next week," he said. "I'll be gone for about 10 days. "I know. I've been preparing the payroll for the men who'll be going," she replied. "Thomas will stay behind as usual to oversee things here." Wyatt hesitated. "I wanted to thank you for your help with James and for managing everything so well these past weeks." "It's my ranch, too," Olivia reminded him with a small smile. "At least on paper." "More than on paper," Wyatt corrected. "You've earned your place here, Olivia. The improvements you've made, the order you've brought, it's made a difference." His praise warmed her. "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear. "Would you like to go into town tomorrow?" Wyatt asked suddenly. "We need supplies before the drive, and I thought you might like to visit the mercantile. Perhaps see about ordering some books." Olivia turned to him in surprise. "That would be lovely. I haven't been to town since we left that day." "I know." His voice was gentle. "I thought it might be difficult for you seeing your old home." "It will be," she admitted. "But I can't avoid San Pedro forever. And I would like to see if Mr. Peterson at the mercantile can order some books for me." The next morning, they set out early to avoid the worst of the day's heat. Olivia wore her best day dress, a light blue cotton that Martha had helped her alter to suit the current fashion. As they drove the wagon into town, she felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. San Pedro had changed little in the 2 months since she'd left. As they passed her former home, now occupied by a shipping company agent and his family, Olivia felt a pang of loss but was surprised to find it less acute than she'd expected. At the mercantile, Wyatt busied himself ordering supplies while Olivia spoke with Mr. Peterson about books. The shopkeeper was delighted to learn of her interest and promised to include book catalogs with the ranch's next order. "Miss Evans, how wonderful to see you," a familiar voice called as Olivia was examining bolts of fabric. She turned to find Caroline Wilson, daughter of the town's banker and one of her childhood acquaintances. "Caroline," Olivia greeted her with a polite smile. How are you? Very well. And you? We've heard such interesting rumors about your situation. Caroline's tone was sweet, but her eyes held calculation. They say you're living at the Double R now, working for Mr. Ryder. Not working for him, Olivia corrected calmly. We're business partners. I own half the ranch. Caroline's eyebrows rose. Indeed, how progressive. Her gaze shifted to where Wyatt stood across the store. And what does Mr. Ryder get from this arrangement? The implication was clear, and Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks from anger, not embarrassment. Competent management and accounting skills, she replied coolly. Mr. Ryder is an honorable man who saw a mutually beneficial opportunity. Of course, Caroline said, not bothering to hide her skepticism. Well, do give my regards to your partner. With a final meaningful look, she moved away to join her mother at the counter. Wyatt approached as Caroline left. Problem? He asked, noting Olivia's flushed face. Nothing I can't handle, she assured him. Just town gossip. Wyatt frowned. About us, I presume. It was inevitable, Olivia sighed. A single man and woman living under the same roof, even with the Coopers present. People will talk. Does it bother you? He asked, studying her face. The gossip? No, the implication that our arrangement is improper. Yes, she admitted. Not for my sake, but for yours. You've been nothing but honorable, and I won't have your reputation tarnished. Something like admiration flickered in Wyatt's eyes. I'm more concerned about your reputation than mine, Olivia. Well, we shall both have to endure the wagging tongues, she said with forced brightness. Now shall we finish our shopping? I'd like to stop at the bookshop before we return to the ranch. They completed their purchases and were loading the wagon when Sheriff Dawson approached them. Ryder, he greeted with a nod. Miss Evans, good to see you both. Sheriff, Wyatt replied. Everything all right. Just wanted to let you know we found that mountain lion you've been hunting. Shot it yesterday up in the hills north of your property. Big male, old and scarred. That's good news, Wyatt said with evident relief. We've lost 3 calves and nearly lost a man to that cat. Young Cooper, I heard. He recovering all right? Yes, thanks to Martha's nursing and Miss Evans's assistance. The sheriff turned to Olivia with a more respectful look than she'd received from Caroline. Good to hear. And how are you settling in at the Double R, Miss Evans? Must be quite a change from your previous life. It's been an adjustment, Olivia acknowledged, but a positive one. The ranch is beautiful and the work is satisfying. Sheriff Dawson nodded approvingly. Glad to hear it. Your father would be pleased to know you're doing well. He touched the brim of his hat. I'll let you folks get on with your day. As they drove out of town, Olivia found herself thinking about the sheriff's comment. Would her father be pleased with her current situation? Jonathan Evans had been ambitious, always reaching for greater success and social standing. Would he understand her partnership with Wyatt, her growing attachment to the ranch and its people? You're quiet, Wyatt observed as they passed the town limits. Just thinking about my father, she replied honestly, wondering what he would think of all this. Wyatt was silent for a moment. I met your father several times, you know, not just when he borrowed money. Oh, Olivia turned to him with interest. He came to the ranch about a year ago, interested in buying some horses for his shipping business. We spent an afternoon riding the property, discussing breeding lines. Wyatt's hands were steady on the reins. He spoke of you often, proudly. Unexpected tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. He never told me he visited the Double R. He mentioned you'd studied bookkeeping, that you had a head for business, said his daughter could outthink any man he knew when it came to numbers. Wyatt glanced at her. He was right. Thank you for telling me that, Olivia said softly. They rode in comfortable silence for a while before Wyatt spoke again. I have a confession to make, Olivia. What is it? When I offered you the partnership, It wasn't just because I needed help with the ranch. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. I admired your father despite his financial troubles, and when I heard about your situation, I wanted to help. So it was charity after all, Olivia said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. No, Wyatt said firmly. It started as a desire to help, yes. But it was always a business decision, too. I did need a partner. I do need your skills. He hesitated. And now that I know you, I can't imagine the ranch without you. The simple statement sent a wave of emotion through Olivia that she wasn't prepared for. I can't imagine being anywhere else, she admitted. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, Olivia realized that her feelings for Wyatt had grown beyond respect and gratitude. There was something more, something that frightened and excited her in equal measure. The cattle drive to Bakersfield began the following week, with Wyatt leading 20 cowboys and nearly 1,000 head of cattle. Olivia stood on the porch with Martha, watching as the massive herd moved out at dawn, dust rising in clouds behind them. He'll be careful, Martha said, correctly interpreting Olivia's concerned expression. Wyatt knows what he's doing. I know, Olivia replied. It's just, you'll miss him, Martha finished with a knowing smile. It's all right to admit it, dear, Olivia sighed. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been watching you two dance around each other for weeks, the older woman said. Wyatt's a good man, but he's been alone too long. He's forgotten how to reach out. I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Martha. I'm not suggesting anything, Martha said innocently. Just making an observation. Now, let's go inside and have some breakfast. We've got a ranch to run while the men are away. The days without Wyatt seemed strangely empty, despite the constant work. Olivia kept busy with the accounts, helped Martha with household tasks, and even learned to feed and groom the horses left behind. In the evenings, she read or wrote letters to friends in Boston. On the 5th day after the drive began, Thomas Cooper rode in with news. Telegraph from Bakersfield, he said, handing Olivia a slip of paper. From the boss. The message was brief. Drive going well, good prices, back in 5 days. Ryder. Olivia felt a disproportionate relief at the simple confirmation that all was proceeding as planned. That night, Olivia sat on the porch, enjoying the cool evening breeze. Thomas had gone to check on James, who was now recovering at his parents' cabin, leaving Olivia alone with her thoughts. As she looked out over the ranch, her ranch now, too, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few months. She no longer mourned the loss of her father's estate or her place in San Pedro society. Instead, she had found purpose in the daily work of the ranch, satisfaction in bringing order to the business side of operations, and a sense of belonging among the people who worked there. And then there was Wyatt. Honest, hard-working, intelligent Wyatt with his rare smiles and steady presence. Olivia could no longer deny that her feelings for him had deepened into something far more significant than business partnership or friendship. The sound of approaching hoofbeats startled her from her reverie. She peered into the darkness, wondering who would be arriving so late. As the rider came into view in the moonlight, Olivia gasped. Wyatt, he dismounted quickly, tying his horse to the porch rail. Is everything all right? He asked, climbing the steps. Thomas, Martha. Everyone's fine, she assured him, rising to her feet, but you're not due back for days. Is something wrong with the drive? No. He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. The drive is fine. I left my foreman in charge once we reached Bakersfield and got the cattle sold. But why? Because I couldn't stop thinking about you, he said simply. About the ranch. About coming home. Home. The word hung in the air between them, full of meaning. I missed you, Olivia admitted softly. The ranch isn't the same without you. Wyatt moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Olivia, I need to say something, and I'm not good with words, so bear with me. She nodded, her heart beating faster. When I offered you the partnership, I told myself it was business, and it was partly, but there was more to it. He took a deep breath. I'd seen you in town before, at church, at town gatherings. I admired you from a distance. Your grace, your intelligence. When I heard about your father's death and the debts, I saw a chance to help you, yes, but also to bring you into my life. Wyatt, Olivia whispered, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. I know it's too soon, he continued. You're still grieving your father, adjusting to life here, and I'm not asking for anything right now. But I wanted you to know that for me, this partnership has become more than business. Olivia found her voice. For me as well, she admitted. I've come to care for you, Wyatt. More than I expected to. The relief on his face was palpable. I rode all night to hear you say that, he said with a tired smile. You must be exhausted, she said, practical concerns asserting themselves. Have you eaten? I can heat something from dinner. I'm fine, he assured her. Just happy to be home. There was that word again. Home. Not just the ranch, but wherever they were together. Wyatt reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and took her hand in his. The simple contact sent warmth spreading through her. Would it be too forward if I asked to court you properly, Olivia? No rush, no pressure. Just a chance to see if what I feel, what we both seem to feel, might grow into something more. I'd like that, she replied, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. Very much. His smile, a real, unguarded smile, transformed his face. Olivia thought she had never seen anything more handsome than Wyatt Ryder in that moment. Dusty and tired from the trail, but looking at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. The next few weeks brought a subtle but significant change to life at the Double R. Wyatt and Olivia's partnership expanded beyond ranch business to include long conversations over dinner, rides across the property, and quiet evenings reading together in the study. They were careful to maintain propriety, especially with the ranch hands and in town, but Martha's knowing smiles suggested their growing closeness was obvious to those who knew them well. July turned to August, bringing even hotter days, but also the satisfaction of a successful cattle sale. The ranch finances, under Olivia's careful management, were healthier than they had been in years. Wyatt began implementing some of her suggestions for diversification, including expanding their horse breeding program and planting additional feed crops. On a particularly warm Sunday afternoon, Wyatt suggested a picnic by the creek, where the shade of the cottonwood trees offered relief from the heat. Olivia packed a basket with cold chicken, biscuits, and a berry pie Martha had made that morning, while Wyatt saddled their horses. They rode to a secluded spot where the creek widened into a pool deep enough for swimming, surrounded by willows and cottonwoods. Wyatt spread a blanket in the shade while Olivia arranged their lunch. "This is lovely," she said, removing her hat and letting the breeze cool her face. "I had no idea this place existed on the property." "I found it my first year here," Wyatt replied, sitting beside her. "It's been my private retreat ever since. You're the only person I've brought here." Olivia felt honored by the admission. "Thank you for sharing it with me." They ate leisurely, talking about ranch matters and plans for the fall. After lunch, Wyatt stretched out on the blanket, hands behind his head, looking up at the patterns of sunlight filtering through the leaves. "I've been thinking," he said after a comfortable silence, "about the future." "What about it?" Olivia asked, leaning back on her elbows beside him. "About expanding the main house, adding rooms, maybe building a proper office separate from the house." "That sounds practical," she agreed. "The business is growing." Wyatt turned his head to look at her. "It's not just about the business, Olivia, it's about He paused. It's about family, the possibility of one someday. Her heart quickened at the implication. Wyatt. He sat up, facing her. I know we agreed to take things slowly, and we have. But these past weeks have only confirmed what I already knew. I love you, Olivia. I want to build a life with you, not just as business partners, but as husband and wife. Olivia's breath caught. Though their courtship had been progressing steadily, she hadn't expected a declaration so soon. Are you certain? We've known each other such a short time. I've never been more certain of anything, he said firmly. But if you need more time, no, she interrupted, her voice clear and sure. I don't need more time, Wyatt. I love you too. I think I have for longer than I've been willing to admit to myself. The joy that spread across his face was answer enough, but he reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips. Then marry me, Olivia. Be my wife as well as my partner. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Wyatt pulled her gently into his arms, and their first kiss was sweet and tender, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally drew apart, Olivia was smiling through happy tears. When? Wyatt asked, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Soon, she replied. I don't want to wait. Perhaps October, when the weather turns cooler. October sounds perfect, he agreed. A small ceremony here at the ranch, with our friends and the ranch hands, Olivia nodded. It's our home, after all. Wyatt's expression grew serious. There's something else I want to tell you, something I should have mentioned before. What is it? Olivia asked, concerned by his sudden solemnity. It's about your father's debts. Wyatt took a deep breath. When I paid them off, I discovered something. Your father borrowed that money to invest in a new shipping venture, one that's just starting to pay dividends. What do you mean? He bought shares in the Southern Pacific expansion to Los Angeles. The company recently started paying returns to investors. Wyatt reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document. This arrived yesterday from the company. It's a payment to your father's estate, the first of many, according to the letter. Olivia stared at the bank draft in disbelief. But the will said there was nothing left. Because at the time, the investment hadn't matured. Oliver Blackwell didn't know the value of what your father had done. Wyatt handed her the draft. This belongs to you, Olivia. The amount on the draft, $500, represented just the first quarterly payment. According to the accompanying letter, similar payments would continue for years as the railroad expanded. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked, still trying to absorb the implications. At first, I wasn't sure the investment would pay off, Wyatt admitted. And later, I was afraid. Afraid of what? That if you had your own money, you might leave the ranch. Leave me. The vulnerability in his voice touched her deeply. Olivia shook her head, cupping his face in her hands. Wyatt Ryder, don't you understand? I stayed at the ranch because of you, not because of our business arrangement. I love you. No amount of money would change that. Relief washed over his features. So you'll still marry me, even though you're about to become a wealthy woman in your own right. More reason to marry you, she said with a laugh. Now you can't be accused of marrying me for my money. His answering laugh was carefree, and he pulled her close for another kiss, longer and deeper than the first. When they finally rode back to the ranch, hands clasped between their horses, Olivia felt a contentment she had never known before. News of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and into town. Martha was delighted, immediately beginning plans for the wedding feast. Thomas Cooper offered to build them a new bedroom suite as a wedding gift, and even James, still recovering from his injuries, volunteered to break the ranch's finest horse as a present for the boss and his lady. In San Pedro, reactions were mixed. Some, like Sheriff Dawson and Mr. Peterson from the Mercantile, offered genuine congratulations. Others, including Caroline Wilson and her circle, expressed thinly veiled surprise that Wyatt would make an honest woman of Olivia so quickly. "Let them talk," Wyatt said when Olivia mentioned the gossip. "We know the truth of our relationship." "I'm not concerned for myself," Olivia assured him, "but I won't have people thinking you felt obligated to marry me because of scandal." "Then we'll show them," Wyatt said simply. "Year by year, we'll build something so solid and true that no one will question what brought us together." The weeks leading to their wedding flew by in a flurry of preparations. Olivia ordered fabric from San Francisco to make her wedding dress, with Martha's help. Wyatt expanded his study to include a desk for Olivia, creating a shared workspace where they often sat in companionable silence, each attending to their own tasks, but together nonetheless. They decided to use part of the railroad dividend to buy new breeding stock, further integrating their personal and business relationships. Olivia also set aside a portion to establish a small lending library in San Pedro, fulfilling her long-held dream of bringing books to more people. October arrived with cooler temperatures and golden light that turned the hills around the ranch to burnished bronze. On the 15th of the month, a clear Saturday afternoon, Olivia stood in her bedroom, Martha helping her with the final touches of her wedding attire. The dress was simple but elegant cream-colored silk with delicate embroidery at the bodice and cuffs. Her hair was arranged in a crown of braids, with a few curls framing her face, and she wore her mother's locket around her neck. "You look beautiful, dear," Martha said, blinking back tears. "Your parents would be so proud." "Thank you," Olivia replied softly, "for everything, for making me feel welcome here, for your friendship." "You brought life back to this place," Martha told her, "and to Wyatt, I've never seen him so happy." A knock at the door announced Thomas Cooper. "It's time, ladies," he called. "Everyone's gathered." The ceremony took place in the ranch's front yard, where lanterns had been hung from tree branches and chairs arranged in rows. A flower-decorated arch stood at the head of the aisle, where Reverend Thompson from San Pedro waited with Wyatt. As Olivia walked toward her future husband on Thomas's arm, she saw only Wyatt tall and handsome in his new suit, his eyes fixed on her with such love that she felt it like a physical warmth. The ranch hands, the Coopers, friends from town, even Oliver Blackwell all faded to background as she reached Wyatt and took his hands in hers. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with traditional vows spoken in clear, unwavering voices. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt's kiss was both tender and passionate, a public declaration of private feelings. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with food, music, and dancing in the barn, which had been transformed with more lanterns and autumn flowers. Wyatt and Olivia moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but always returning to each other's side, as if unable to bear separation for long. As night deepened and the party continued, Wyatt took Olivia's hand and led her away from the noise and laughter. They walked to the porch of the main house, their house, and stood looking out at the land that had brought them together. "Happy, Mrs. Ryder?" Wyatt asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely, Mr. Ryder," she replied, leaning into him, "though I'm still getting used to my new name." "It suits you," he said, kissing her temple. "Almost as much as being mistress of the double R. Co-owner," she corrected with a smile. "Equal partners, remember, always," he promised, "in everything." They stayed on the porch a while longer, watching the stars appear above their land, before returning to their wedding celebration and to the beginning of their life together. Spring 1877 brought new growth to the Double R Ranch. The cattle herd had increased by nearly a third. The horse breeding program was gaining reputation throughout California, and the main house had been expanded to include the promised office and additional bedrooms. Olivia stood on the porch, one hand resting on her rounded belly, watching as Wyatt worked with a young stallion in the corral. 6 months pregnant with their first child, she felt a contentment that sometimes seemed too perfect to be real. The railroad dividends continued to arrive quarterly, allowing them to invest in further improvements to the ranch. Olivia's lending library in San Pedro had opened in January, staffed by a retired schoolteacher and already popular with the town's residents. Even Caroline Wilson had grudgingly admitted that the Ryders had become an important part of the community. Wyatt finished his training session and turned the horse over to James Cooper, who had fully recovered from his injuries and was now the ranch's head wrangler. Seeing Olivia on the porch, Wyatt crossed to join her, removing his hat as he climbed the steps. "Should you be standing so long?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I'm perfectly fine," she assured him. "The doctor said walking is good for me." "Walking, yes. Standing and watching me instead of resting, no." Despite his words, he smiled as he placed a hand over hers on her belly. "How's our little cowboy today? Or cowgirl," Olivia reminded him. "Very active. I think he or she will be riding before walking." Wyatt's face softened with wonder as he felt a kick against his palm. "Still hard to believe," he murmured, "that we created this life together." "One of many things we've created together," Olivia said, gesturing to the prosperous ranch around them. "Though this one is definitely the most miraculous." Martha called them in for lunch, and they joined Thomas at the table. The foreman had news about a potential new market for their horses. The army was looking for mounts for cavalry units. It could mean a significant contract, Thomas explained. "If they like what they see." "When would they come to inspect the stock?" Wyatt asked. "Next month. An officer from Fort Tejon will visit." Olivia made a note in the small book she kept with her. "We should prepare the best yearlings for showing," she suggested. "And have the breeding records organized." Wyatt nodded. "Good thinking. Thomas, work with James to select the most promising horses. I want to make a strong impression." After lunch, Olivia retired to the office to update the ranch ledgers while Wyatt returned to his training. Their routine had developed naturally over the months of marriage, each contributing their strengths to the partnership, consulting on major decisions but trusting each other in their respective domains. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a daily ritual they both cherished, Wyatt wrapped an arm around Olivia's shoulders. "I was thinking about names today," he said. "For the baby." "Oh, and what have you decided?" she asked, amused by his tone. "William for a boy after my father," he suggested. "And for a girl, how about Alina after your mother?" Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes. Pregnancy had made her more emotional than usual. "Those are perfect names," she said softly, "though we might call her Ellie for short." "William or Ellie Ryder," Wyatt tested the names. "The next generation of the double R." "The first of several, I hope," Olivia said, leaning against him. "I always wanted siblings growing up. It was lonely being an only child." "Me too," Wyatt agreed, "though I had cousins nearby." He placed his hand on her belly again. "I want our children to have what we didn't: siblings, security, a legacy." "They will," Olivia assured him. "We're building that legacy every day with every decision we make." As darkness fell, they moved inside to the comfort of their home. Later, lying in bed with Wyatt's arm protectively around her, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the devastating reading of her father's will to becoming half-owner of one of the region's most promising ranches. From grief and uncertainty to love and the anticipation of a child, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Wyatt murmured, his voice drowsy. "About how things work out," she replied. "How the worst day of my life led me to the best days I've ever known." Wyatt pulled her closer. "I thank God every day for bringing you to me," he said, "even if it came through hardship." "As do I," Olivia whispered, placing her hand over his heart. "As do I." On a warm day in July 1877, William Thomas Ryder came into the world after 12 hours of labor. Olivia, exhausted but triumphant, held her son while Wyatt looked on in awe, his usual composure completely abandoned in the face of the tiny, perfect being they had created. "He has your eyes," Olivia said, noting the deep blue of the baby's gaze. "And your chin," Wyatt replied, gently touching the baby's face with one finger. "He's beautiful, Olivia. Perfect." Martha, who had assisted the doctor during the birth, beamed with almost grandmotherly pride. "Strong lungs on this one," she observed as William let out another cry. "He'll be calling the cattle in no time." Life at the Double R adjusted to accommodate its newest member. A nursery was set up in the room adjoining Wyatt and Olivia's bedroom, though William spent his first month sleeping in a cradle beside their bed. Olivia continued to manage the ranch accounts and correspondence, often with the baby asleep in her arms or in a basket nearby. The Army contract came through in August, providing a steady income from horse sales that further stabilized the ranch's finances. Wyatt expanded their holdings, purchasing an adjacent property that added another 1,000 acres to the Double R. By William's first birthday, he was taking his first tentative steps, determined to follow his father everywhere. Wyatt took to fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to ranching, spending time each day with his son despite the constant demands of the ranch. "He's going to be a horseman," Wyatt declared proudly when William showed an early fascination with the ranch's animals. "Look at how he watches the horses. He's interested in everything," Olivia pointed out. "Books, too." She indicated the way the child would sit and turn pages of a picture book, babbling in his own language. "A scholar and a rancher, then," Wyatt conceded. "Like his mother." Life settled into a rhythm of seasons and growth, both of the ranch and of their family. The railroad dividends from her father's investment continued, allowing Olivia to expand the lending library in San Pedro into a proper public library with a dedicated building. In the spring of 1879, Olivia discovered she was expecting their second child. William, now a sturdy toddler of nearly 2, patted her still flat stomach with curiosity when they explained that a baby brother or sister was growing inside. "Baby?" he asked, his vocabulary growing daily. "Yes, little man," Wyatt confirmed, lifting his son into his arms. "You're going to be a big brother." Eleanor Martha Ryder arrived in November, a week earlier than expected but healthy and strong. Where William had his father's coloring, Ellie, as they immediately called her, had Olivia's lighter hair and green eyes. "She's going to be a beauty like her mother," Thomas Cooper predicted when he came to see the new arrival. "And hopefully with her mother's good sense," Wyatt added, earning a tired smile from Olivia. The Double R continued to prosper through the early 1880s. The railroad expansion brought more settlers to California, increasing demand for both beef and horses. Under Wyatt and Olivia's joint management, the ranch established a reputation for quality stock and fair business practices. William grew into a thoughtful, energetic boy who loved books as much as horses, often reading while perched on the corral fence. Ellie, true to her father's prediction, developed into a charming child with her mother's quick mind and determination. In 1883, when William was 6 and Ellie 4, Olivia gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Thomas James, after the two men who had been such important parts of their ranch family. Young Tommy, as he was called to distinguish him from Thomas Cooper, had his father's quiet strength but his mother's diplomatic skills, even as a young child. The years brought changes to San Pedro as well. The small coastal town grew with the expanding railroad connections, and the Ryders became respected members of the community. Olivia's library evolved into a cultural center, hosting readings and educational programs, while Wyatt served occasional terms on the town council, lending his practical perspective to local governance. Olivia sometimes marveled at how completely her life had transformed from that terrible day when Oliver Blackwell read her father's will. From the brink of destitution to prosperity, from isolation to a loving family, from uncertainty to purpose, all because Wyatt Ryder had offered her not charity, but partnership. On a golden afternoon in October 1886, Wyatt and Olivia celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. Friends from town joined the ranch hands and their families for a feast and dancing, much like their wedding celebration a decade earlier. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the land they had nurtured together, Wyatt found Olivia standing on their porch, watching their 3 children playing with the other ranch children. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Ryder," he said, slipping his arm around her waist. "10 wonderful years," she replied, leaning against him. "I never imagined such happiness was possible." "Nor I," he admitted, "until you came to the Double R." They stood in companionable silence, observing the life they had built, the thriving ranch, their beautiful children, the community of workers and friends who had become extended family. "I received another letter from the Southern Pacific today," Olivia mentioned. "They're buying out some of the smaller investors. They offered to purchase your father's shares." "Our shares," Wyatt corrected. "What did you tell them?" "I thought we should discuss it first," she replied. "It's a generous offer, enough to buy another property if we wanted, or set aside for the children's education." Wyatt considered this. "What does your business sense tell you?" "That the railroad will continue to grow, and so will the value of the shares," she said thoughtfully. "But there's also wisdom in diversifying our investments." "Then we'll sell half," Wyatt decided. "Keep some of your father's investment growing, but use the rest to secure the children's future." Olivia nodded in agreement. "A balanced approach. I'll write to them tomorrow." 10 years of partnership," Wyatt mused. "Both business and marriage. I'd say we make a good team, Olivia." "The best," she affirmed, turning to face him. At 32, Olivia was more beautiful than ever, her face bearing the subtle marks of motherhood and experience, her eyes still bright with intelligence and love. "Thank you for taking a chance on a penniless young woman all those years ago." "Best decision I ever made," Wyatt replied. At 40, he had gray beginning to show at his temples but was still strong and vital, a man in his prime. And to think it all started with a mountain of debt and a stubborn determination not to accept charity. Olivia laughed. "We were both stubborn, still are." "Some things never change," Wyatt agreed, pulling her closer. "And I'm grateful for that." As the stars began to appear above the Double R Ranch, Wyatt and Olivia Ryder stood together, partners in every sense of the word. Surrounded by the legacy, they continued to build a legacy born from adversity but flourishing through love, respect, and shared purpose. In the years that followed, that legacy would only strengthen. William would eventually take over management of the horse breeding program, introducing new bloodlines that made the Double R horses sought after throughout the West. Eleanor would combine her mother's love of books with her own artistic talent, illustrating and later writing stories that captured the spirit of ranch life for children across America. Thomas would develop a gift for agriculture, experimenting with new techniques that increased the ranch's productivity and sustainability. And through it all, Wyatt and Olivia remained the heart of the Double R, their partnership a testament to what was possible when opportunity met determination, when generosity was matched with dignity, and when business acumen was balanced with love. What had begun as a desperate arrangement, her father's will leaving her nothing but debts, a cowboy paying them all and splitting his ranch with her, had blossomed into something neither could have imagined that day in San Pedro. A life richly lived, a love deeply shared, and a legacy destined to endure for generations to come.